Alright, so for those of you who are worried about how tight their tenon is fitting top and bottom on their mortise, there are a couple of ways of fixing that or hiding it. You could just glue your tenon in and fill it in later with some sawdust and glue, or some tiny end grain pieces of wood. But one way that you can also do it is to use wedges. The wedges will go in the end grain and it'll splay those ends out and make it fit nice and tight on the outside. If it's a little gappy at the back, that's fine, because there's not much glue surface because it's long grain to end grain anyway, and so you don't really have to worry about a whole lot. So to get ready for wedges and to accept the wedges, I went ahead and marked where I want to cut my relief cuts. That gives a spot for a wedge to go. I've also marked down here. I'm going to actually be drilling with a small drill bit 2 circular holes right there at the end of those relief cuts. That will prevent my stretcher piece from splitting if I just drive a wedge in there without drilling that relief hole. The odds are pretty good I'm going to do some sort of damage, and probably split my stretcher piece right down the grain. So I'm going to use my drill. It's okay if I don't have a drill press. To do this, I want to make sure I'm not drilling down into my bench. I prefer to drill these first and then cut the hole, or cut the pieces, or cut the relief cuts. There are some people who prefer to do it the other way. I just find I'm comfortable enough with my sawing ability to be able to hit a 3/32 inch hole from the top. That's also why I scribed down the face of my tenon first, because some people will just try doing this by eye. I would highly suggest, or highly recommend, not doing that. So now I can take my saw and scribe across. Alright. So now I'm going to saw right on that line. Whatever size hole I drill, I want to make sure that it's a little bit bigger than the saw kerf that is left by my saw. My Lie-Nielsen one leaves a fairly thin kerf, so I don't have to worry about it. You can see that those holes are plenty big enough. Probably, there's a lot of tear out on the back, so it's harder to see actually. But I want to have these 2 relief cuts and those little marks. Now I would take whatever material I'm making my wedges out of, and I would lay out my wedges. They don't need to be super long. They do need to be a little bit longer than whatever this gap is. And usually for something like this, a dovetail ratio of 1 to 8 is pretty good. It's not a super steep angle, and that's usually more than enough to splay these wings out. You want to be careful when you're laying these out. You don't want to have these super far in, because that wood's not going to be able to flex and bend enough. You also want to be careful. I want to put my wedges in my project. Let me grab a bench. Hang on. See, the grain is running in this direction on the bench. I want to wedge with the wedge running this direction, not this direction. If I wedge this direction, it will fill any gaps that are going this direction, this way, that way. But it will probably split my leg. I want to always be wedging perpendicularly to the grain of the piece that has the mortise in it. If I'm wedge with the grain, I'm running the risk of splitting something that I don't want to break. So just be careful when you're pounding wedges in. I use a steel hammer to seat all of my wedges. That tends to work the best because a wooden mallet, you don't really hear the change when it bottoms out. With a steel hammer, it has a definite sound change when you get that wedge tapped in as far as it's going to go. Do not tap a wedge farther than it wants to go, because again, you will break something and you will be a very, very sad individual. If you spend all that time building this project and then have to figure out how to fix something that's split. So hopefully later this week I will have a video about applying finishes and fixing any gaps or problems that you encounter with your joinery during the glue up. So talk to you all later.